The summer I got trapped in a cursed town and became part of its dark history, posted by You Lost Wanderer 18 in Arno Sleep. Posted on May 20th, 2025. Okay, Reddit, buckle up because this is the wildest, most messed up thing that's ever happened to me. I've been sitting on this story for years and I'm finally ready to spill it all. It's long, really long, so grab a snack, maybe a blanket, because it's going to get creepy. This is about the summer of 2018 when I, a clueless 22-year-old, got stuck in a tiny Ohio town called Harrow's End and accidentally got tangled in a curse that's been haunting the place for over a century. I'm still not sure I escaped it. Here's the whole saga, the beginning, a broken car and a bad decision. I was fresh out of college with a communications degree that was about as useful as a paperweight. No job, no plan, just $2,000 in savings and a dream to road trip across the US in my 2003 Honda Civic, which was held together by duct tape and prayers. My goal was to hit the West Coast, maybe find myself, or whatever cliché nonsense 22-year-olds think. 2 weeks into the trip, I was cruising through rural Ohio, somewhere between Columbus and the middle of nowhere, when my car started making this awful grinding noise. Like, you're about to be stranded, awful. I limped into the nearest town, Harrow's End, population 1,147 according to the faded welcome sign. It was one of those places that looked frozen in time. A single gas station, a diner called Mabel's, a creepy old church, and houses with so many American flags it felt like a parade was about to start. The only auto shop, Jim's Fix-It, was my only hope. Jim, a grizzled guy with a beard like a Brillo pad, took one look at my car and said the alternator was toast. It'd take 5 days to get the part, and it'd cost me $500. I had no choice but to stay, and Jim pointed me to a boarding house run by a woman named Mrs. Callahan, who rented rooms to strays like me. The boarding house and Mrs. Callahan's boarding house was straight out of a horror movie. It was this massive, creaky Victorian mansion with turrets, stained glass windows, and peeling paint that made it look like it was frowning at you. Inside, it smelled like mothballs and old wood, with lace curtains that probably hadn't been washed since the 70s. Mrs. Callahan herself was a wiry woman in her late 60s, with a smoker's rasp and eyes that could stare through your soul. She gave me a room on the 3rd floor for $25 a night, cash up front, and told me, don't go poking around where you don't belong. The way she said it wasn't a suggestion, it was a warning. My room was small, with a sagging bed, a rickety dresser, and a single window overlooking the town square. There was a statue in the square of a man on a horse, some old war hero, and it gave me the creeps from the start. That first night, I couldn't sleep. The house groaned like it was alive, and every few hours, I'd hear footsteps in the hallway. Slow, heavy ones that stopped right outside my door. I told myself it was just the house settling or another boarder, but it felt wrong. I kept my door locked and tried to ignore it. The town and its secrets. The next morning, I went to Mabel's Diner to kill time. The place was packed with locals, farmers in overalls, truckers, and old-timers who looked like they'd been glued to the counter since Eisenhower was president. I ordered coffee and pancakes, trying to blend in, but I could feel eyes on me. People whispered to each other, stealing glances. I figured it was just small-town suspicion of outsiders, but it made my skin crawl. This guy, Dale, slid into my booth uninvited. He was maybe 40, with a flannel shirt, a trucker hat, and eyes that didn't blink enough. "You're at Callahan's, right?" he asked, like he already knew. I nodded, and he leaned in, smelling like cheap coffee and motor oil. "You seen her yet? The lady in grey?" I laughed, thinking he was joking, but his face stayed dead serious. He told me about a local legend, the Lady in Grey, a ghost who haunted the boarding house. Supposedly, she was Eleanor Harrow, the wife of a Civil War soldier named Thomas Harrow. He went off to fight and never came back, so she waited for him, year after year, until she couldn't take it anymore and hanged herself in the attic. Now, she wanders the house, looking for her husband in every young man who stays there. If she decides you're not him, things get bad. Dale's story was creepy, but what made it worse was how the diner went quiet while he talked. Everyone was listening, pretending not to. I paid my bill and got out, but the story stuck with me. I wasn't a believer in ghosts, but Harrow's End had a vibe that made you question everything. The first signs of trouble. That night, I heard the footsteps again. This time, they were louder, like someone was dragging their feet across the floorboards. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and listened as they stopped outside my door. Then a whisper, soft, feminine, and so clear it felt like it was inside my head. "Is it you?" I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and checked the room. Nothing. No one. Just that heavy, suffocating silence. I didn't sleep after that. The next day, I asked Mrs. Callahan about the lady in grey. Her face went tight and she snapped, "Dale's got a big mouth and a small brain. Don't listen to him." But she wouldn't meet my eyes, and when I asked if anyone else was staying on my floor, she just walked away. That's when I started noticing other weird stuff. The locals avoided me like I had the plague. The gas station clerk, a kid maybe 19, gave me my change and whispered, "Don't stay too long." Even the statue in the square seemed off. I could have sworn it was facing east when I arrived, but now it was turned slightly north, like it was watching the boarding house. I decided to explore the town to clear my head. Harrow's End was small but oddly charming. There was a general store, a library with books older than my grandparents, and a church with a cemetery that looked like it belonged in a Gothic novel. I wandered into the cemetery reading the headstones and noticed something chilling. A lot of the graves were for young men, spanning decades, even centuries. Their epitaphs were vague but eerie. Taken by the night, lost to the shadows, gone too soon. One caught my eye. Thomas Harrow died 1863 with the inscription, "Beloved of Eleanor, forever waiting." Was this the soldier from Dale's story? Digging deeper by day 3, I was desperate for answers. My car still wasn't ready. Jim kept saying the part was on back order, which sounded like BS, and the town was starting to feel like a trap. I went to the library and asked the librarian, a sweet older woman named Miss Evelyn, if they had any records on the town's history. She hesitated, then led me to a dusty archive room in the back. "Be careful what you look for," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some things don't like being found." The archive was a goldmine of creepy. Old newspapers, town records, and even some handwritten journals painted a grim picture. Harrow's End had a history of disappearances. Young men, usually travellers or drifters, who vanished without a trace. The earliest case I found was from 1875, a guy named William Tate, who'd stayed at the boarding house and was last seen near the cemetery. His belongings were found in his room, but he was gone. There were dozens of similar stories spread out over decades, all with the same vague explanations: left town, accident, run away. One article from 1982 mentioned a guy named Michael Reed, a hitchhiker who'd stayed at Callahan's. His car was found abandoned on the outskirts of town, keys in the ignition, and a single grey ribbon tied to the steering wheel. I also found a journal from 1890 written by a pastor who'd served at the church. He wrote about Eleanor's curse, claiming she'd made a deal with something unholy to bring her husband back. The deal went wrong, and now she was bound to the town, forever searching for Thomas. The pastor believed the disappearances were her doing, that she took men who didn't pass her test. He'd tried to perform an exorcism on the boarding house, but the townsfolk stopped him, terrified of angering her. The last entry just said, "I fear I've drawn her attention." Pray for me. I was shaken but determined to confront Mrs. Callahan. That night, I found her in the kitchen, chopping onions with a knife that looked more suited for a slasher flick. I laid it all out: the disappearances, the journal, the lady in grey. Her hands shook, and for a moment I thought she'd stab me. Instead, she put the knife down and said, "You're digging in places you shouldn't, boy. You want to live? Stop asking questions and leave when your car's fixed." I pushed harder, asking about the statue, the footsteps, the whispers. Her face went pale, and she grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "You stay away from that cemetery," she hissed, "and don't you dare go near the attic. You hear me?" The attic and the first encounter. I should have listened, but I'm an idiot. That night, I couldn't sleep. The footsteps were back, louder than ever, and the whispers had turned into a low, mournful hum. I don't know what possessed me, but I decided to check the attic. Mrs. Callahan had mentioned it specifically, and I figured it was the key to whatever was going on. I grabbed a flashlight and crept up the narrow staircase at the end of the hall. The attic door was heavy, like it was made of iron, and it creaked so loud I thought the whole house would wake up. Inside, it was a mess of cobwebs, old furniture, and boxes of junk. The air was thick, like breathing through a wet blanket, and it smelled faintly of lavender and decay. In the corner, I found a small shrine, a faded photograph of a young woman in a grey dress, surrounded by candles that had long since burned out. Next to it was a noose, just hanging there, swaying slightly even though there was no breeze. I heard her before I saw her. That same mournful hum, now a full-on wail, like someone grieving a loss so deep it could shatter glass. I turned, and there she was, the lady in grey. She was translucent, her dress tattered, her face blurry except for her eyes. Those eyes were like black voids, pulling me in, and I felt this cold, heavy weight on my chest, like she was trying to drag me into the floor. She reached out, her fingers brushing my arm, and I swear it felt like ice burning my skin. She whispered, "Is it you?" Over and over, her voice echoing in my skull. I don't know how I got out of there. I stumbled down the stairs, tripped, and nearly broke my neck. When I got back to my room, I locked the door and shoved the dresser against it. I didn't sleep, just sat there with my flashlight on, waiting for dawn. The town's complicity. The next morning, I went back to the diner, shaken but determined to figure out what was happening. Dale was there, and I cornered him. I told him about the attic, the lady, everything. He didn't laugh this time. Instead, he looked terrified and said, "You saw her! You're marked now!" He explained that the town knew about the curse but kept it quiet. Every few years, a stranger would come through, stay at Callahan's and vanish. The townsfolk believed it was the price of living in Harrow's End. Eleanor's curse kept the town safe from worse things, as long as she got her tribute. I was furious. "So you just let her kill people?" I asked. Dale shrugged, like it was just how things were. "You don't fight her," he said. "You survive her." He told me to leave before the 5th night. Apparently, that's when she decides. If I was still in town, I'd either be gone or, well, I didn't want to know. I went to Jim's Fix-It next, demanding my car. He admitted the part had arrived days ago but claimed he'd been told to delay me. By who? He wouldn't say, but I could guess. I told him to fix it by the next day or I'd call the cops. He just nodded, looking guilty. The cemetery and the statue. That night, I couldn't stay in the boarding house. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the cemetery, figuring it was the heart of this whole mess. The air was thick, like a storm was brewing, and the town was so quiet it felt like it was holding its breath. When I got to the cemetery, I saw something that still haunts me. The statue from the town square, the one of the man on the horse, was standing among the graves. I know it wasn't there before. It was like it had walked there, and its head was turned, staring right at me. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. Then I heard her again. The lady in grey. Her wail cut through the night, and I saw her floating between the headstones, her dress trailing like smoke. She moved toward me, slow but relentless, her eyes locked on mine. I backed up, tripping over a grave, and dropped my flashlight. In the dark, I could still see her, glowing faintly, her hand outstretched. "Is it you?" she kept saying, her voice desperate now, almost pleading. I ran. I don't know how I made it back to the boarding house, but when I got there, Mrs. Callahan was waiting on the porch, smoking a cigarette. She didn't look surprised. "You went to the cemetery, didn't you?" she said. I nodded, too freaked out to lie. She sighed and told me the full story, or at least as much as she knew. Eleanor Harrow had made a deal with something dark, something older than the town itself, to bring her husband back. It didn't work. Instead, it bound her soul to Harrow's End, forcing her to relive her grief forever. The statue, Mrs. Callahan said, was Thomas Harrow, or what was left of him. It moved because it was tied to her, watching the town, making sure no one interfered with her search. The disappearances were her victims, men she deemed wrong, who didn't match her memory of Thomas. The town let it happen because they believed the curse protected them from whatever Eleanor had summoned. If she stopped getting her tributes, something worse would wake up. The escape and the aftermath I wasn't sticking around to be a tribute. The next morning, I got my car from Jim, who didn't charge me a dime, probably out of guilt. I packed my stuff and peeled out of Harrow's End, not stopping until I hit Columbus. I sold my car for scrap, took a bus west, and tried to forget the whole thing, but I couldn't. A year later, I was browsing Reddit and found a post on r/paranormal about the ghost boy of Harrow's End. It was about me. The story had twisted into a local legend. A mysterious stranger who faced the lady in grey, survived her test, and vanished. Some versions said I was a ghost myself, others said I'd broken the curse. I wish that were true. I've never gone back to Harrow's End. I don't know if the lady is still there, or if the statue still moves, or if Mrs. Callahan is still running that cursed boarding house. But I do know this. Every few months, I hear footsteps outside my apartment door, slow and deliberate, like they're waiting for me to open it. Sometimes I smell lavender and decay. And in my dreams, I see those black hole eyes asking, "Is it you?" I don't know if I escaped Harrow's End or if I brought something with me. So Reddit, if you're ever driving through Ohio and see a sign for Harrow's End, don't stop. Don't get gas. Don't eat at Mabel's. Don't stay at Callahan's. Just keep driving. Trust me. TLDR. Got stranded in a creepy Ohio town, stayed in a haunted boarding house, uncovered a century-old curse involving a ghost called the Lady in Grey, saw a moving statue, and barely escaped. Now I'm a local legend, but I think the curse might still be following me. 0 out of 10. Don't visit Harrow's End.